Good morning, everybody. Casey, as per usual, you always have the best thumbnail pics. I love it. All right, we're a little light on people today. Hopefully some folks will sign on. If not, you all will get your education. So the good news that I will fill you in on, and I know those of you who heard other classes with me have heard this already, I do get essentially time served. They're starting my quarantine from when my symptoms began last Monday. So that means this Monday I get to be back in person with y'all. So on the 4th, this coming Monday, we will start back in person, in group, and be all together. So I'm pretty excited about that. Hopefully you all will also benefit from being able to be in person again as well. So today what I'm planning to do, although certainly I would love more people to be here for this, but I had a group activity I was going to have y'all do. We'll see. Hopefully more people will show up. If they don't, then we will table that activity probably just as it's going to work best if we can have multiple groups. But for sure, we're going to go through and do the rest of the lecture we've been talking about. So this is the Things We Know That Ain't So chapter, which I still love the name of. Your book, like, psychologists are funny people, or they try to be, and you know, they try to be super clever here. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I'm sharing my sound this time and we'll be good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and stick this in presentation mode and throw on our captions. All righty. So if you remember at the end of the day on Wednesday, we've been talking about some examples of how if you look at things differently, even in psychology, where we're trying to base things on science, right, you get different interpretations of things. And so one of the things your chapter spends a lot of time talking about is self-deception, which I really like, because this is a big part of what we do as humans, right? We like to think we know what we know, right? And then sometimes we just don't. Sometimes we are sort of misleading ourselves, again, not intentionally, but sometimes we essentially go along with what we think we've always known or something along those lines. So these are some of the key terms your chapter pulls out related to that. So I thought we'd go over this first before we kind of dive into some of the examples. So cognitive complexity is the ability to process multiple aspects of a situation at the same time and to use those to draw your conclusions rather than only focusing in on one thing. Self-deception in general is the tendency to select or believe desirable information and ignore or deny undesirable information. So again, this goes with a lot of the other things we've talked about, right? Like the me side bias and things along those lines. But we do this really personally to ourselves, right? So we have to really challenge ourselves if someone presents relevant information that contradicts what we think. I'll give you an example. So I really worked last year on my classes where they read like secondary literature, and we do a lot of discussion to bring more diverse voices into my syllabi. And the way that people have been talking about that in pedagogy circles and, you know, academic Twitter was decolonizing the syllabus. But when I talked to Dr. Slivka, who's in English and teaches post-colonial literature, she said that's not really a proper use of that term because it has a really distinct meaning within that subfield. And so my knee-jerk reaction was to be like, well, what am I supposed to call it then, right? But instead, I thought back, and I think we were texting, and I was like, huh. And I like thought about it, and I was like, okay. So I need to come up with a different term for it so I can be more accurate. And that is, I'm able to do that because I challenge myself to, right? But a lot of people, even academics, wouldn't. So just sort of giving you an example of how I have to challenge myself even. Intuition is our ability to seem to understand without conscious reasoning or without being able to identify the basis for a judgment. And, every once in a while our intuition is just right. But really, obviously, what we should be doing is basing it on evidence. Authority, we've talked about before, right? We think about gaining or accepting knowledge based on presumed expertise or power of an individual in a position of authority. So that could be, whoever is president, it could be whoever are the scientists who are making these decisions. It could be a whole host of things, right? And sometimes, again, people in authority will be trying to give us the most accurate information. And sometimes they are purposely not trying to give us the most accurate information. And sometimes they unintentionally give us inaccurate information. So we can think of the beginning of the pandemic when the CDC was like, we don't know if people should mask, right? Because they didn't know how the virus was transmitting. But then I think within a month, they were like, no, you should be masking, right? You're allowed to change your mind based on new evidence. And people who are not fluent in scientific literacy don't recognize that. They think that like you should just never change your opinion, and if you do, you're like a flip-flopper. And then faith is a belief and idea without assessment of evidence for its validity. And when we think of faith, we tend to think of religion, right? But certainly faith can be in ideas and ideologies, in political powers or positions, right? And again, even though it's really difficult, we should challenge this, right? So one of the things I have faith in, based on the evidence I've looked at, is the idea that like there are not gender differences in the brain. One of my favorite quotes about it, I'm gonna have to paraphrase, but something like, there's no such thing as a female brain, just like there's no such thing as a female liver, right? Like it just doesn't make sense. And yet there's some research to suggest, and certainly it's meaningful to some people to think of those things as somewhere housed in the mind, at least, because it explains how people like non-binary or trans individuals understand their world. And in fact, there's probably a lot we don't know about what brain differences might exist for those folks, right? And so I need to keep my mind open to the fact that there might be some aspects of gender that are somehow coded into the brain, and be aware of that. All right, so we're going to do some fun self-perception stuff. All right, so which dot does everyone think is bigger? The one with the small circles or the one with the big circles? And you can just throw it in the chat, unmute yourself. Oh boy, I think everybody's groggy this morning. There we go. Saying the small circles. Davin has it correct. Yeah, they're actually the same size. Tacey's backing him up. But you think it is the one with the small circles around it because of the context, right? Yeah, and I look at this and I picked this out and I put it on this slide, and I know that that's true, but I still see the one with the small circles around it looking bigger. That's, our brain does fun things like that because our brain uses context. Alrighty. Another thing that they talk about is illusion, which is a phenomenal experience to misperceive the nature or characteristics of a stimulus. So it's not a delusion. A delusion is like you believe something is true when it's not. Illusions are normal sensory and perceptual experiences, right? So if we were to just look at this painting, right, and we didn't understand anything about perspective, right, we might think, gosh, this person is ridiculously small compared to this person. They must be like a fairy or something, right? And this person is like the mediumist person. But in fact, because we do understand perception, right, and because we have a general understanding of things in relative space, what we know is what the artist is trying to portray here is that this person is further away, right? Even though were I to like take a screenshot, copy paste, and put it here, right, it would look like that person was like some sort of magic tiny person, right? But that's not at all what's actually trying to be portrayed, right? So I think that that's a really important point. So how do we overcome these myths, these misconceptions, these misperceptions, these self-deceptions? So basically, these are some of your book goes through a whole bunch of different sources for misbelieving myths that we have. And these are common errors we make in reasoning about events of the world. So as we evaluate scientific claims, these mistakes are common, and understanding that these exist can be the first step in avoiding and overcoming them. These errors occur when we fail to use our knowledge of principles of critical thinking and probability, or when we accept without question the beliefs. Again, remember that's that faith. Doesn't have to be religious. That faith can be in an idea, right? So from any sources, right? So we conclude in the authors conclude with this chapter about the types of questions we should ask ourselves about our own beliefs. And these are the questions to ask. So I certainly could see one of your scenarios or a couple of your scenarios on the next exam, for example, including these questions. So what is the source of that belief? What evidence might support that belief? How can I evaluate that belief? And should I sometimes reserve judgment, right? So I really like that last question, because there are definitely times where we honestly just do not have enough information to know whether our belief is accurate or not, right? It's just, sometimes that's what happens. And so sometimes what we need to do is get more information. So sometimes you all might even hear me do something along these lines when we are in class. If someone asks me a question and I don't know the answer, right, I might say something like, that's a great question. Maybe that's a good thing to look up, right? Or I'll try to figure that out. Or sometimes I'll just Google in the middle of class. So, you know, and that's like a microcosm of, you know, again, these larger, broader issues that we should make sure we have enough information about before we make judgments. So what's the source of my belief? Is it something that I, you know, learned from my parents? Did I learn it in second grade and maybe things have changed in science since then, right? What evidence supports it? You know, can we look at the literature and see what's out there? How do I evaluate my beliefs? Right? Do I do pro cons? Do I compare them again to the existing scientific literature? And should I sometimes, again, reserve judgment? The evidence supporting their belief, I think, is really important to ponder in this day and age, right? Because like we saw in our last exam, sometimes anyone can throw anything on TikTok, right? Or Instagram, or any of the other social media platforms, or, you know, worse, I think in some ways, YouTube, right? If it's in a video, people just like tend to believe it, right? So I think that there's been a lot of misperceptions because of people choosing those types of sources. And so I don't know if you all saw the news this week, but YouTube has officially actually banned all anti-vax videos. It doesn't mean they're all going to be instantly gone. You know, I believe there's something on the order of like tens of thousands of videos uploaded to YouTube every minute. I mean, it's sort of absurd. And so it takes a while to weed that stuff out. But just making that statement, that's that as a platform that sort of espouses free speech, saying, yeah, but we're not going to allow you to say some things that are blatantly false and in fact can be harmful to people, is really important, right? And I love that they started with, it's just going to be about COVID, but now it's any anti-vax sentiments, which again, good. The book also talks about illusory correlations, which is a spurious relationship between factors that appears to depict a meaningful relationship that is in reality the product of chance. And these are one of my favorite things to look at. We're going to click through and look at some of the other examples in a second here. With this great website about spurious correlations. This is a guy who I think was getting his PhD in a math type field, and just started looking at data for some of this fun stuff. Like, what could I find that looks like it might be related? And he found all kinds of stuff, like the letters in the winning word of the Scripps National Spelling Bee. So that word that the winner gets right, that makes them the winner, how many letters are in that word, correlates with the number of people killed by venomous spiders. I mean, like, it doesn't make any sense, right? And as you can see, like, the number of deaths by venomous spider is ridiculously small. You know, sometimes it's like 2, but on a big year it's 15, right? But if you look at the data, it looks like it goes together. But again, there are lots of other fun ones here that I'm going to go ahead and show you all. So again, he also has made a book about it now. US spending on science, space, and technology correlates with death by suicide for these particular methods. And if you look at his correlations, you know, they are huge. Like, we don't see correlations in the 0.99 percentile, right? It's like almost the exact same thing. It's absurd. The number of people who drowned by falling into a pool correlates with the number of films Nicolas Cage appeared in. Doesn't make any sense. It's just a spurious correlation, right? But it really shows how you can kind of look at any data and be like, well, these numbers vary together, therefore, maybe not therefore, right? Per capita cheese consumption, with a lot of the number of people who died by being tangled in their bed sheets. This one kind of shocked me just because of the number. I mean, again, in the grand scheme of things, it's a small number, but it's a lot more than like people who die by venomous spiders, right? And I would say we're all much more afraid of venomous spiders than we are dying in our bed sheets. I'm not trying to like freak anybody out for tonight, right? Probably never going to be an issue for any of us because we'll probably wake up if something happens. But, you know, again, spurious correlation, but sure looks like that's a thing, especially again, when you get an R at the 0.94. Remember, the closer R is to 1, the stronger it is. This is the divorce rate in Maine, correlated with the per capita consumption of margarine. Right, and again, at the 0.99 range. The age of the woman who won Miss America with murders by steam. And I mean, this one's really interesting because it's such a weird jump around, right? Total revenue generated by arcades correlates with the number of computer science doctorates. So for this one, you could like postulate something like, this is how the computer science doctorates people go and relax. You know, I don't know. I also think it's interesting that arcades still make this much money. Like, I had no idea that they were a $1 billion plus industry. I just figured everyone gamed at home now. Worldwide non-commercial space launches. This would be interesting to look at updated, right? Since we're getting more of, you know, commercial ones. That correlates with sociology doctorates. Why not? per capita consumption of mozzarella cheese in particular. Remember, the main one was just cheese. And that correlates with the number of civil engineering doctorates awarded. People who drowned after falling out of a fishing boat correlates with the marriage rate in Kentucky, which has been steadily decreasing, apparently. US crude oil imports from Norway in particular, with drivers killed by the collision with a railway train. Per capita consumption of chicken with total crude oil imports. Again, big correlations here. Drowning in swimming pools with nuclear power plants. I don't think purchasing a Japanese car is causing death by suicides by crashing your motor vehicle, but there is, again, this spurious correlation. And then how much uranium is stored at nuclear power plants following the trajectory of the number of math doctorates awarded, PhDs in math. So he does have a link where you can like try to go find new ones, which is fun. And he has more charts and things like that as well. So this is a fun website to investigate, poke around. Here are some of his other charts as well. The number of lawyers in North Carolina, for example. And so you could just tell it, okay, here's 2 random things, and it'll correlate for you. So Nicolas Cage, he's correlating with a lot of stuff. So here's one with the female editors on the Harvard Law Review. Sure, why not, right? And so the point of all this, besides just being fun, right, to look at some of these absurd things, is to see that a lot of things can look like they are correlated, when in fact they might not actually be related at all, right? And again, huge percentages. I feel like I'm like doing a Trump, like huge, but like we don't see correlations like that when we're actually looking at variables we want to be correlated. So that's sort of the funny thing. And obviously he had to really dig to find these, right? These absurd things. But what are your reactions to these spurious correlations? Again, feel free to unmute or just type in the chat. Yeah, Nicolas Cage, bad luck. we should not be a Nicolas Cage. I also think he like hasn't really made many movies recently, so maybe that's affecting things positively. I don't know. Right. I also have a quick video I'll show you all about spurious correlations, again, just because I think they're so fun. So
have you ever wondered how related the number of people that drown in pools each year is to how many Nicolas Cage films are released the same year? Turns out there is a 66.6% correlation between the two. Or how about the fact that there's a 99.26% correlation between the divorce rate in Maine and the per capita consumption of margarine? Or a 99.79% correlation between spending on science, space, and technology, and the number of suicides by hanging, strangulation, and suffocation? Just because there is a correlation between two variables doesn't mean that one causes the other. This assumption is a logical fallacy, and yet we're drawn to headlines like people who have more sex make the most money. Unfortunately, this does not always equal that. Even though it may look like it, cheese consumption probably isn't related to how many people die tangled in their bedsheets. But sometimes it isn't so obvious. Numerous studies found that menopausal women taking hormone replacement therapy had a lower than average incidence of heart disease, leading doctors to believe that hormone replacement could protect against heart disease. However, when women underwent randomized control trials, they found that hormone replacement therapy actually increased the risk of heart disease. When the original data was finally reanalyzed, it was found that women who took the therapy were of a higher socioeconomic group with a better diet and exercise regime. This was the real cause behind decreased risk of heart disease. Another case found that those who used nightlights as a kid were more likely to develop myopia, but there's actually a strong link between parental myopia and the development of child myopia, so in reality, myopic parents were simply more likely to leave a light on in their child's bedroom. These are examples of a lurking variable, where A does not cause B, but rather C causes them both. It's a little like taking people who have lung cancer and thinking, hey, they're all carrying lighters in their pockets, so lighters must cause cancer, while not realizing that smoking is the confounding variable. And scientists work hard in their studies to try and avoid this. But it gets worse when popular media takes advantage of these potentially coincidental correlations. And one study about the chocolate weight loss connection was actually designed as a way to expose how science reporting can be sensationalized. A science writer with a PhD in microbiology ran a real clinical trial where participants were assigned to 3 groups: a low-carb diet plus a 1.5-ounce chocolate bar, and a group that maintained their regular diet. At the end of 3 weeks, the chocolate group did lose the most weight, but the journalist consciously used terrible science. He used 15 participants and measured 18 different measurements, including weight loss, cholesterol, sleep quality, blood pressure, well-being, etc. And when you use a small group of people and measure a large number of things, you're pretty much guaranteed to get a statistically significant result, which Veritasium has an amazing video on here if you want to check out. The result could have easily been something different, such as chocolate correlates to lower blood pressure. If this study had been peer-reviewed by other researchers, it would have been called out. So instead, he submitted it to a journal for a fee of €600, making up a fake institution name, the Institute of Diet and Health. He then sent out a press release to dozens of media publications, and very quickly, getting slim by chocolate was front-page news. With that in mind, however, we can't dismiss correlation entirely. Correlative evidence is an essential part of science. Double-blind studies are not always possible or ethical to run, often leaving correlation as the best evidence available. When every possible causative relationship is systematically explored, correlation can be used as a powerful tool for assessing cause and effect relationships and progressing science even further. Big thanks to Tyler Vegan for providing his charts on these interesting correlations. You can check out his website or his book Spurious Correlations for more peculiar examples.
So yeah, you can see how much and how easily these things can be misinterpreted by the news, right? I've seen multiple examples of this happen previously, where they say, oh, well, there's a correlation, so this must cause that, right? The chocolate thing with weight loss, I've also seen with like chocolate and lifespan, right? Again, you can think of things like socioeconomic status, right? You're probably able to buy more chocolate if you're better off, but that also means you have access to better healthcare, right? Which is going to probably prolong your life. But as they said, correlations are a really important part of especially psychological science, because there are many things we cannot double blind assign people to. I don't want to, and I'm sure no one here wants to randomly assign someone to be abused, for example, right? And we can't randomly assign things like gender or race, right? So we need other ways to examine them. And to sort of account for this and try to take into account these third variables, these nuisance variables, psychologists design more and more sophisticated statistics in order to account for those. So just running a correlation now, probably not necessarily publishable, but running a very complex statistical model that takes into account, 3 to 10 variables all at once, much more common, much more acceptable. And so most of the statistics I do for my studies, for example, are regression level or above. So I've done things like hierarchical linear modeling or structural equation modeling. And you don't have to know what any of those things are right now, but just know that they exist and psychologists created them. And people in, say, math departments won't even necessarily know what you're talking about if you bring one of them up, just because they are created by and used by social scientists.
Have you ever wondered how related the number of people
Already, so this is in your book, so probably most of you read through this already, hopefully, and have seen whether these things are correct or not. But I figured we could have some fun talking about these. So The idea that some people can remember things from the first 6 months of life. Based on what you all have learned about memory in other classes, what do you think of that proposition? Yeah, false, definitely. Why? Why is this false? And it doesn't have to fall on Imani. Anybody can bring it into play. And if we think about the basics of cognitive psych, for those of you who have taken classes with Dr. Ariel or just thinking back to Psych 101, yeah, Imani, I love your explanation. It's true. Like, I really remember my favorite related to that is yesterday I told my husband, like, I don't remember getting up in the middle of the night with our daughter to help her go potty, but I have a picture on my phone of her laying on my lap at 3 a.m. So apparently that happened, right? Sometimes we're sort of like half asleep. Yeah. And also, based on what we know about brain development and extensive studies looking at the earliest things people can remember, we really don't solidify memories until we're about 4. So I keep like thinking about that, and how will that be for people my daughter's generation or earlier, that they will have like lived through the pandemic, right, but not remember it. Like, that's going to be really interesting to see how that affects their development growing up. This is what psychologists think about, right? When we think about kids. What do we all think of this idea that opposites attract, that we are going to only find people more attractive if they're different from us? Yeah, Tacey, it is false, actually. So there are obviously occasions where this happens, but in fact, the vast majority of the time, we tend to at least end up in long-term relationships with people who are more similar to us. And down to, like, there are studies about like people not consciously, but just sort of ending up with people who are of similar attractiveness to them. And clearly we tend to, yeah, exactly like Emily is saying, that we are attracted to people who are similar to us, people with similar ideas, right? And that's not to say, again, like, I know several people who are like a Democrat married to a Republican, for example. And they make it work because they're similar in other ways, right? But certainly, you know, we tend to look for people we're comfortable with, that make that connection with us. The idea that people can use their minds to influence physical events. Unfortunately, telekinesis is not a thing, y'all. I really wish it was, because it'd be kind of cool, right? And I think this one was pretty interesting too, right? Because this is, I think, based on some of the newer science that I was always told, just go with your first impulse on a multiple choice test. Don't ever change the answer. And I remember, I think by the time I got to the end of high school, start of college, they were saying, well, no, if you look back and you're like, gosh, why did I put that answer? It's clearly this other one, then change it, right? And that just makes intuitive sense. What do we think of the use of using Bluetooth devices, your car, or you know, one of those in-ear things? Does that help us, you know, get away from unsafe driving? You would think, and it certainly is slightly better. But I'll give you an example. So my cognitive professor, sort of my equivalent of Dr. Ariel when I was an undergrad, her name was Dr. Payne, and she had done so much cool research. She had worked for like the Air Force, and one of the things she had worked on while she was in grad school was actually for Ford Motor Company, looking at these hands-free devices, and they used eye tracking. Yeah, Emily is saying it exactly right. You're switching your attention. You're not giving your full attention. And so even when people are not trying to like hold something, right, they're just hanging on a conversation with someone else out there, what they found is if you do eye tracking in a car simulator, they're not looking at the road, right? They're looking other places. And for interestingly, this is not as bad when people are like in the car with you. I don't really know why, although certainly they can obviously also be a distraction. Yeah. This is actually really interesting too, Imani, the fact that like people think that these new displays we have, like I jokingly call our new car that we got in February a spaceship, because like it's got like this heads up display, and it's got all these different features on a screen, and that's all supposed to keep us safer, right? But in fact, it can be more distracting, is what the research is finding, probably not surprisingly. But so what Dr. Payne told us is that she had been doing this research and seen, you know, all this data all day about people not looking on the road while they're on their hands-free devices. And she got home and someone had crashed into an apartment building in her complex in their car because they were on the phone, and I believe using a hands-free device. And she was just like, there we go, my data in action, right? Yeah, I think that it is better, right? It's definitely better than trying to like balance your phone. I don't know if anyone ever saw the Mythbusters episode where they had people, I believe, drive drunk and then try to drive while using their cell phone, and they were actually worse using their cell phone, like holding it in their hand. Actually, we've got some time. Let me see if I can find that video because it's fun while I'm talking. But yeah, it can be, especially if you're trying to like juggle something. So on the phone. See if it exists. Yeah, it looks like there's a fairly short clip of it too. Alrighty. So I'm going to show this, but yeah, that it's actually worse than driving while drunk, which like
the skies. Their next myth has them hitting the road. Come on, admit it. You know you do it. Talk on the cell phone while.
So this is obviously older, because unless you like purposely choose to have one, most people don't have flip phones like that anymore, right? But the principle still
driving. And deep down, you know it's dangerous. But is it as dangerous as that other driving taboo?
Here comes another one. The myth is that it is just as dangerous to drive while talking on a cell phone as it is while driving drunk.
Well, obviously, you know, while you're dialing, your eyes are not on the road, but what we really need to pinpoint is whether the conversation itself is dangerous.
Yes.
Yeah, people seem to be under the impression that if you're at a stoplight, it might be okay to dial because you're not moving, but then it's okay to talk once you actually get moving. And that's the key thing about this myth. Is it, in fact, safe to talk on a cell phone while you're driving?
That's what we're going to test.
This person posted the full episode in 3 parts. This must have been before you could post longer than 10-minute videos to YouTube. So let's see if in the end they kind of show us a conclusion here.
Round 3 of the cell phone versus drunk driving test. And Carrie and Adam are fueled up and ready to go. They've already passed the control run, but failed the course while talking on the phone. Now they've consumed just enough alcohol, and on empty stomachs no less, to remain below the legal limit while driving.
So it actually looks like the second part. Sorry, this is what happens when I spontaneously look stuff up.
It's round 2 of Adam and Carrie's
the cell phone piece, so I'll show that.
Driving test. They've already passed the control run, so it's time to break out the cell phones and try a more distracted lap.
Okay, for the cell phone test, I'll be off on the sidelines talking into a cell phone, delivering 3 different types of tasks to the driver in the car. The first one is repeat the sentence. They just have to repeat what I've said. The second one is a verbal puzzle. They have to actually think about what their answer is going to be. And then the third one is a monologue where they have to list 5 different things about some particular subject that I'll give them. There's no doubt in my mind that their driving performance is going to be significantly reduced.
I'm a little nervous about it. I don't think I'm gonna do very well on this one.
Okay, go. All right, if I say Jack stole Ann's ball, who's the thief?
That would be, Jack.
Jack.
Okay, repeat the sentence. The driver was stopped for driving 67 miles per hour in a 20-mile-per-hour zone.
Driver was stopped for driving in a 15-mile-per-hour zone. I admit it?
No, you missed it.
The driver was driving 67 miles per hour in a 20-mile-per-hour zone.
Okay, give me 5 things that are in the interior of your car.
5 things in the interior of my car was the steering wheel,
Stopwatch,
the rear view mirror,
the pad of paper,
the seatbelt,
charger,
and the speedometer.
Driving this course was insane trying to talk on the cell phone. You could not pay attention to both at the same time.
If you see a picture with a diamond, a rectangle, and a circle, and the circle is to the right of the rectangle and directly above the diamond, is the rectangle right above the diamond?
I have no idea. Rectangle.
Could you repeat that again?
Which girl is taller if Jane is shorter than Kim?
Kim is taller.
Kim is taller.
Give me 5 things that are part of your daily work or activities.
Kissing ass.
Drilling and faulting.
Doing my hair.
Doing on-camera PMCs.
And, yoga.
Making phone calls.
And, oh man, driving to work.
Checking my email. And avoiding phone calls from certain people.
And,
Here they come racing to the finish line. And the winner is...
Oh! That was awful. That was absolutely awful.
We actually gave her a fail for the overall course. There was one time there where she was trying to maneuver the wheel and she got very creative, kind of held the wheel with her elbow.
Yeah, not to mention you failed over half the course's obstacles. And Adam?
He did end up failing. He failed half of the elements.
That makes the Mythbusters 0 for 2.
There are
So as you can see, not good. Don't do it if you could avoid it. And obviously hands-free is going to be better. The Try Guys have also done a series on this where they did drunk versus high versus on the cell phone, I think. So I'll try to post those on Blackboard just because they're fun. Yeah, right. Can be pretty dangerous. The last one I'll touch on here is PMS. So a lot of people think like every woman gets really bad PMS when she has her period. But if you look globally, actually women in other cultures where PMS is not a thing that's talked about will get the physical symptoms of being premenstrual, but they won't be moody or anything like that. So it's not a universal phenomenon. All right, some other definitions they throw around here. Repression. This is that Freudian psychodynamic term that we're supposed to forget negative emotional thoughts. In fact, if we think of repression in terms of like trying to put them out of the way, sure, we do that, but they're still in there, and often they're really like seared in your memory. We talk about this with clients with PTSD, them trying to avoid thoughts. We talk about them as if like you have a bill and you're like, oh, I can't pay this right now, and you like shove it in your desk drawer. Right, you're going to open that desk drawer and find it later, right? Like those memories are going to come out at another point. The gambler's fallacy, which is the belief that a series of random events are self-correcting. So if you're in the stream of bad luck, then you're due for good luck. That's not really how probability works, and certainly not how the type of probability used in like a casino works, for example, right? Binocular disparity is the slightly different appearance of an object when seen by each eye individually. Because of just however our eyes look at things. You can get the idea for binocular disparity. If you hold your finger in front of you and then close one eye and then the other, it'll seem to kind of jump back and forth a little. And that's that binocular disparity. Psychokinesis. Yeah, this is what I was talking about with telekinesis. We can't do it. Sorry. And then they talk about extramission as an inaccurate way to describe how the eye works. People used to think we were like Superman and put rays out from our eyes. In fact, we take light in and it goes through the retina and the optic nerve, and that's how we interpret things. All right, I also found this fun lady on TikTok. I mean, she's not cool, but she explains myths in psychology, which I really like. So we'll watch some of her.
Psychology says that when someone's laughing and they look at you, they're attracted to you.
Psychology says no such thing. And don't even get me started on the one where if you dream of someone, that means they're in love with you. How is that supposed to work?
4 hidden signs you have high functioning anxiety.
How about 3 signs that you shouldn't be talking about psychology on TikTok? 1, you're exploiting other people's mental health for your own clout. 2, you do not provide any evidence for any of your claims. 3, you actively block people who ask you to provide evidence for your claims. How about please stop? Thank you.
If you can't get someone out of your head, it's because they can't get you out of theirs.
Can we not teach people to be stalkers, please? Thank you. There is no way this is a psychology fact. Think about it. How would we test this?
Saw the flowers first. It means you're meticulous, modest, and shy.
No, it does not mean anything at all like that. This is just a figure ground illusion. There are many around like that. None of them are personality tests. Perceptual phenomena are not personality tests.
Did you know that the way you make a fist can explain a lot about your personality?
Did you know what the Barnum effect is? A lot of these supposed personality tests you see online, as well as a bunch of other things that tell you your personality or pretend to, work because of Barnum effect. Nobody actually is sure whether P.T. Barnum really did say that there is a sucker born every minute. But you know, all these people who are selling you these assessments, they're following in his footsteps nevertheless.
Finally, a follow-up to the TikTok where I said 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut.
I got so excited when I saw this because I thought the follow-up was going to be, I have since learned that serotonin that's produced in the gut is used right there in the gut to regulate intestinal movement because it does not cross the blood-brain barrier and it serves multiple functions in our body. But I guess not. Max, we talked about this, didn't we? You shouldn't say according to science when it isn't. And you shouldn't say studies show when there are no studies. Некрасиво обманывать, Max.
Hey, did you know that we store trauma, we store anxiety, we store emotions in our hips?
Hips? Hips? Is that supposed to be short for hippocampus? Because it can't be short for amygdala, right?
There's a fun way is to get disproving or discrediting some of these things. I think I really like how she pointed out the commonly used phrases that make us think this stuff is legit, like studies show or according to science, when a lot of times there is no science, there are no studies related to these things, right? Okie dokie. So on Monday, we'll be back in person in Root. Come ready to do the activity. We'll start with that on Monday. And I look forward to being able to see you all again. Take care of yourselves and have a great weekend.